Hi, I'm Todd Shapiro, President and CEO of the Illinois CPA Society. Throughout 2021, we've been honored to speak with several of our nation's first Black CPAs as we celebrate the Black CPA Centennial and seek to preserve the history and accomplishments of these amazing and early trailblazers. One man who is truly grateful for the doors that were opened for him by the pioneering Black CPAs is my friend and peer, Ralph Thomas, CPA, CGMA, MBA, and CEO and Executive Director of the New Jersey Society of CPAs. Though Ralph became a CPA in 1982, he is still a trailblazer in the CPA profession, as he is the first and still only Black CEO of a state CPA society. Ralph grew up during the civil rights movement, a time when, despite the progress made by many Black CPAs before him, Black professionals still often faced discrimination. Ralph is proud to say that he found success in work and life thanks to his coveted CPA credential. And today, I am proud to sit down and talk to him about his journey as a Black CPA and his experiences interviewing the trailblazers that came before him for the Black CPA Centennial video series. Ralph, first, thank you for all you have done to help us spread awareness of the Black CPA Centennial and celebrate some of the storied CPAs like Johnny Clark, Dr. Johnny Clark, Lester McKeever, and Burt Mitchell.
Well, first of all, Todd, I want to thank you and the Illinois Society for asking me to be a part of this process. It really was heartwarming. So it was very interesting to see to interview these folks, hear their story, hear the obstacles and things that they had to endure in order to become a CPA, and just to hear their stories about their careers. So I really owe a debt of gratitude to you and the Illinois Society for really providing that opportunity with me for me, because it's something when you have an opportunity to interview these trailblazers, and you talk, and I reflect back on, wow, I had a difficult time, but these guys had an incredibly tough time back in that time period, in terms of sitting for the CPA exam, getting their experience requirement met. So it was really heartwarming to have the conversations with them.
So we're going to talk more about that because I want to hear more reactions. But before we get into it, let's hear about Ralph Thomas, because again, you've had your own journey, and I think it's important for our viewers to understand your journey, because it's one thing to go back and talk to that first 100, which we did, but things. I want to hear how things changed and how things didn't change. So we really want to talk about yours. So you grew up. You're way older than me, decades older than me.
Thanks, Todd.
But you grew up during part of the civil rights movement. I always call them sort of the days of rage, the civil rights movement. So can you take us back to your early life? Because I think our people viewing this would love to hear what that was like, your early life, and tell us sort of what was a typical career outlook. Where'd you grow up? And what was a typical outlook like when you were growing up for Black individuals?
I'm originally from Washington, D.C., grew up in Washington, D.C., so Washington was predominantly African American. So it was sort of different than, what maybe other folks that look like me that are in other cities had to experience, because of, you know, um, at that time, Washington was about 85% African American in terms of the population. Um, but growing up, I was fortunate, to have, great parents. I share this with a lot of folks. My dad had an eighth grade education. He was from um, Texas, and came to Washington in the 1940s because that was one of the only places that blacks could come and get jobs other than domestic, or what was referred to as a boot black and whatnot. So he was able to land a job in the federal government, which he did. Stayed in that position for until he retired. and whatnot. They, I guess, the thing that my parents always pressed upon my brother and my other sister was the importance of education. And so, because he only had an eighth grade education, he thought it was very important that if we were going to have an opportunity to be successful, that we could do that. And I, my siblings and I owe a debt of gratitude to our parents because they sacrificed to make sure that all of us had college educations. We all have, undergraduate degrees and graduate degrees. Um, and it's all because of them, because they pushed that. They said that that was important. And they also emphasize the importance of being involved because my dad was a Mason and was the Grand Master of the District of Columbia and whatnot, and my mom was an Eastern Star, which is another large organization in that regard. She was a worthy matron, but they really emphasized the importance of us going to school. So it wasn't anything like, oh, I don't feel like going to school because I'm sick today. You got you're going to school and I'm going to take you to school. So, I think all of my siblings and I had perfect attendance from grade school all the way through high school because we never missed a day. And that was because it was that important to them that, we have a foundation and an education. My brother ended up being an electrical engineer. My sister ended up becoming a school teacher and then an assistant principal. So, and then here's a lowly old me who thought he wanted to be an engineer and lasted all about 10 days when I started college and I switched over to the business school at Lehigh University, my alma mater. But so it was an interesting pathway for us. Again, our parents didn't accept excuses of why, oh, you're not feeling good here, take an aspirin, you're going to school, or take some cough medicine or whatever. But they really inspired us, and I think with if they hadn't done that, who knows where I would be, my brother and older sister would be. But so that's kind of the Ralph Thomas story about that. Now, I went to Lehigh University, which is a predominantly white institution. When I came to Lehigh, couple things were important. It was the second year of women at Lehigh, and then most importantly, when I looked at my colleagues of color who were coming in to the school, it was six in my class. The head up there. So it was and coming from Washington D.C. going to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, it was an interesting transition. And I always share this story with folks when they ask. I said for the first couple of weeks I didn't unpack my bags because I didn't think I was going to be there a long time. So, but I did, and ended up getting undergraduate degree in business with a major in accounting, and also ended up getting a MBA from Lehigh. And I did all of that in the span of 4.5 years. So, and the reason was I wanted to get it done and get back to DC. And after graduating, I went back to Washington and started my career with what was then Price Waterhouse. Had the opportunity to intern with them for about 3 years, 3 times before starting to work with them permanently. And again, I think when I joined, there were 3 other folks of color in working in the firm.
The whole firm.
Well, in the Washington D.C. office.
3 people. Yeah. And how many people were in the whole office? About?
Oh, probably a little bit over almost 100 folks.
Okay.
Now there were, clerical folks that were of color, that ran the steno pool and whatnot, and ran the mail room and whatnot. But in terms of professionals, and uh, it was, I guess, again, one of the big things that I worried about when I started permanently there is I came in mid-year, and Um, I was up for promotion to senior accountant, and unfortunately, none of my other colleagues who were of color had made senior in the scheduled amount of time of 3 years. And so I was really, really worried about whether I was going to go through that same thing because I was going to be up in 2.5 years. And I said, "Oh, this is gonna." So I remember encountering one of my colleagues, and she said, "Ralph, you look kind of down today, or what's going on?" I said, "Well, I'm really worried. Promotions are coming up, and I'm be honest with you, nobody of color has made senior in this office in the regimen amount of time of 3 years. It's been 4.5 years or more." And I said, "I'm up, and it's 2.5." And she said, "Oh, you don't have anything to worry about." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she says, "Oh, I saw the list and you made it." So I said, "Oh my gosh." Um, so that told me one thing, I needed to, really work on my skills to connect with my peers there so that I could be in the loop. Because here I was all worried that I wasn't gonna, make it in the regimented amount of time, and I'd have to, spend another year or so trying to get to become a senior accountant there. So I think the other thing, in one of my internships there, it was an interesting experience. I was working on a consulting project, and the senior manager came out for the job, and so he said to the other guys that I was working with, he said, "Who's that guy over there?" And I said, "Oh, that's Ralph Thomas. He's an intern, and he's helping us out during the summer." And so they were coming to have a meeting with the client. And he said, "Well, we're going to be meeting with the client. Is there somewhere we can send Ralph?" And the senior accountant on the job said, and he used to give me a ride home every evening.
And I'm guessing he was white,
Yes.
as
Yes.
was the manager.
Yeah, and the manager was white. Yes, the senior manager. And so he shared with me that story. He says, when the senior manager came out, he kept asking about, and then wanted us to send you somewhere. And I said, and he said, I don't understand that. And I said, "Well, I understand it." So he didn't want to have me around when they were meeting with the client for whatever reason. And that was an internship there. So there were still those issues back at that day when there were the big eight. The challenge of, you know, being accepted, I guess, and whatnot. So I quickly, thought all I needed to do was put my head down and work, and then I would, be able to navigate. But I soon learned that, again, finding out from my peer that I had made senior, was going to be promoted to senior accountant, that I needed to do more than that. I needed to network with people. I needed to, get involved in things. So I started doing that, and some things changed and turned around and whatnot. But it was still those early days where very few folks of color were in the big eight firms at that time. So it was a challenge.
So I really want to, and we're going to dive a little more into, but I want to go back, and then we're going to come back to this because I want to hear more about pressure you felt and the responsibility. But I want to go back. I just want to touch a little more on when you were growing up, when you had your parents. You said I'm assuming your mom wasn't college educated. Your dad had an eighth grade education.
Right.
Did you ever say, in those days, and you were going to high school in the late '60s, and you know, let's be honest, racism was still pretty broad based. Did you go? Why should I go? Did you ever question why am I going to go to college? What jobs are out there? People are who's going to hire me? Did you ever what how did you ever question it?
Internally, I did, but but like I said, my parents were very adamant about you're going to college. So that's the way. And again, being in Washington D.C. was a little bit different because of the makeup of the constituency there. So the thought was, yeah, you're going to go to college because that's the only way that you can really have an opportunity to advance. So And again, growing up, our parents, if you were sick, you still went to school. It didn't matter. And as a result, I was a bright student, and you'll probably be surprised to know that I was you know, um, the valedictorian of my junior high school and high school class. And so, um, and my brother and sister all did. We all went to the same school. So, as I came along, being the youngest child, all I had teachers that they had, and they said, "Oh, I had your sister, and yeah, she was a great student. I expect the same thing from you." So, so it was tough sometimes following in the footsteps of my siblings. And particularly when I got to high school, and one of the teachers, "Oh yeah, I had your sister. Yeah, she was great. Yeah, and she did well in my class, and I want to see if you're going to do as good." And so that teacher actually bet me that I wouldn't, get better grades than my sister, and I ended up being the valedictorian. And he said, "I never thought that would happen." So he ended up giving me $100 bill for that because we had a bet. So it was, like I said, it was interesting because again we went to all the same schools, and I had some of the same teachers that my brother and sister had.
Who were your role models? Who, I mean, did you have your parents? Obviously, you speak so highly of your father. Clearly, he was a role model. But when you thought about engineering and when you thought about, well, what am I going to do? It sounds like college was it. I lived in the same house. My parents, at one point in time, I told them I was thinking of not going to college, and they were like, "Well, that's good. You're thinking about that, but you are." Um, did you have role models? Did you have people that when you were in high school you went, that's it. This is somebody that who inspired you?
Well, I guess the one person that I could reflect on who inspired me was um, a gentleman by the name of teacher James Stover, and he taught architectural and industrial engineering. And like I said, I really the high school I went to was a, a traditional, sort of not a traditional public school because students could go there who were out of their section because it had these specialties. It had a lab techniques course. It had a music a program, where kids from all over the school, all over the city could come and, try to get admitted into that program. And so, again, my brother and sister went there and I followed in their footsteps. So, the challenges I had were, with the teacher say, "Oh yeah, I had your sister, I had your brother." Yeah. And then I guess, initially I thought about engineering because that's what my brother wanted to do. Um, but then, like I said, when I got to college, that lasted about 10 days. And then I switched to the business school because I just felt, well, engineering is not for me. And, the dean of the engineering school said, "Oh, why don't you try it? Give it a go." And I said, "No." He said, "Well, just try a semester." And I said, "No, I think what I want to do, I think I'm thinking about business." So I actually went to one of our uh, centers there at Lehigh and took a test. And it said I had this aptitude towards business. And that's how I ended up in the business school.
So you're going to college. You're thinking about it. You decide to go to Lehigh in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And by the way, I now have learned that you are really smart because you're the valedictorian and of your class. And I have also learned that you are the baby of the family, which now, Ralph, I will never forget that because I'm going to remember that. And that explains an awful lot, by the way.
Well, originally, Todd, I was destined to go to the University of Texas because my dad is from Texas. I could go as an in-state student, and because also I lived in the District of Columbia, you can go to as an in-state student to any place because the district is a territory. So I had a full scholarship, and all of a sudden just changed my mind because I said, boy, I'll be down there, probably be only able to come home once a semester, when Christmas time and the end of the year because of the distance. And oh, by the way, there are 35,000 people at the University of Texas in Austin. And so I picked up a full scholarship there. I ended up getting a scholarship at Lehigh, but I had a free ride at Texas. But I just thought it was going to be, not the place for me with that many students and being that far away from home.
So you decide to go to you decide to go to Lehigh. I'm just going to make sure I capture this. You grew up in Washington D.C., which, as you said, was predominantly Black community, which was a very again different experience than a lot of people have. You decide to go to Lehigh University, which, as you said, there were 6 people of color in your and when you say
My class.
in your class, and I'm guessing that class was not insignificant. It was larger.
Well, and the other thing, Lehigh would just gone co-ed, so it was the second year of women at Lehigh. So in that class, excuse me, it was a class of about a dozen. 6 were African American females, so it was really a challenge. And I had gone to Lehigh sight unseen. A recruiter from Lehigh had come to my high school and talked about, but I had never seen this school, and that's why I said when I started, I didn't unpack my bags for the first 2 weeks because as I rode up and when parents were taking me to Lehigh, I said, "Oh my goodness, what am I in for?" Bethlehem Steel was the biggest thing going in that area. So you had the steel mill. We woke. The steel mill was our time clock. Wake up in the morning because at 7 o'clock every day they emptied the blast furnaces, so that those fumes came into our dorm. So you really didn't need an alarm clock to get up. So, but at the end of the day, as I look back, I'm glad I stuck in there because I and my siblings kind of got on me, said, because I told them I wanted to leave, I wanted to come back home, and they said, you need to tough it up. Now they went to historically Black colleges, versus me going to Lehigh University. But to roll forward, I'm glad I did stay there. I've been a trustee. I was a trustee for Lehigh for 14 years, a trustee emeritus, the first person of color to be a trustee emeritus. So I had a number first. I ended up being president of the Alumni Association. Again, a first because there had never been a person of color to do that. So I look back and I said, well, I had a couple of little milestones there, but I've also been very engaged with Lehigh because, I had a lot of support from faculty and staff there that kept me there and helped me navigate through there. And so I'm very actively involved in giving back and trying to, mentor students of color that are coming in. And I must say, it's things have changed at Lehigh since that time. 30% of the incoming freshman class this year are folks of color and ethnicity, which is really a milestone. So versus when I was there, when I started there.
So so when you started at Lehigh, obviously you pull up on campus. It's noticeable. You again. I'm guessing your high school was predominantly Black.
All Black.
All
Yep.
Black. Your high school is all Black in a community that was 85% Black. You go to Lehigh, you pull up. Holy smokes! There's no Black people or very few Black people. Did you feel pressure? Did you feel pressure to succeed? Did you feel that the weight of the world was on your? Did you have any people of color who were mentors to you? Who sort of helped you through that process? And I assume, did you have any Black instructors?
Didn't have any Black instructors, other than a couple of graduate students. But there was a African American dean of students there, or associate dean of students, and his name was Dean Harris, and he really, I think, was the glue that kept me in. And then the other thing was majority faculty um, were very helpful to me. One professor in particular, an economics professor, said, "Ralph," and we had a great relationship. He had a nickname for me. He called me the neighborhood when as we got together, and he said, here's what you should do with your career. You should become a CPA, get an MBA, go work for, one of the big accounting firms, and then go into private industry, and then maybe go into, either banking or finance or something like that. And then, ultimately I could see you running your own business. I said, and, as I look back on my career, what did I do? I went into public accounting. I went in, I did a couple stints in private industry with, the Potomac Electric Power Company in Washington, and then breakup of AT&T, and then I ended up going into banking at Citibank, and then what I did after staying being at Citibank for almost 13 years, I ended up hitting up the New Jersey Society of CPAs. So you look back, and I laughed at him when he said that, but he said those are the things that I just picture going to happen in your career or the thing, and I laughed at it with him, but look back and said, wow, well, he really had an insight um, to really, because everything he pretty much said, those are the steps and pathways that I've gone down. So, but it was interesting, growing up in Washington with such a large minority population, you still had those, you know, issues of being a person of color.
It's great to hear that you had a role model. It's great those positive. But did you feel at Lehigh, again, thrown into a very, very different world and environment? Did you feel that did you experience any level of racism?
Oh yeah. I ended up joining a fraternity, and it was a white fraternity there, because it was a jock house kind of, because there were a lot of football players and wrestlers there. And one of the jobs I had in school was I was an athletic trainer for football and for wrestling. So you and I had a situation when I was pledging, and we got called up, how they do with pledges. You're going to clean the house because you did, da 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 da. So we were doing that. And
Were you the only black person in the fraternity at that time?
there was another gentleman who was not a pledge. He was a brother, but he was a lone person. But one day we were tasked with having to clean the frat house, and the guy, who was a little bit intoxicated, and was how pledges get ribbed and stuff. So he said, "Clean this thing, Ralph. That's what you guys like, do. You're," and and made some negative comments about it, and I was really upset at that, and the other gentleman who was a brother came and said, "Look, he's had a little much too much to drink and everything," and having to work with him because this guy individual was a wrestler and I was a trainer and manager for the wrestling team. So yeah, you had those moments where people would say things, and then they retrench or whatever, and um, so yeah, I had those challenges at Lehigh, but I think like I said, I just hung in there and did my thing and got out, in 4.5 years with 2 degrees. But I've gone back because I saw the need to help those students that are coming into Lehigh these days, to let them know that they have somebody that they can reach out to if they have challenges. Because again, people helped me along the way, and they said, in particular, this economics professor that kind of laid out my career. He says, "You can do this."
So you said you said that your brother and your sister said, "Don't, you can't quit. You're gonna stick it out." So clearly at some point in time you said, I'm done. I'm going home. This isn't for me.
Well, yeah, like I said, I didn't unpack my bags for, my luggage for 2 weeks because I said, well, this is not my first trip off campus was to go to the library there to go look at other colleges, predominantly, historically black colleges, because I said, and then my trip home at Thanksgiving, I actually went to Howard University where my brother had gone to school to see what would happen if I transferred there. And it ended up that I would lose a whole bunch of credits from Lehigh. So I said, okay, my next option is I'm going to get out of here as fast as I can. And that's why I finished in 3.5 years, um, my undergraduate degree. And then lo and behold, I decided to stay on another year to do an MBA. But because, faculty members said, you should do this, and again, I had done 3 internships with PW at the time. And, recruiters said, oh, you don't need to do an MBA. You can come on. And I said, no, I think I need to do that because I need to have as many credentials as possible to be, I think, successful in there. Because you say, oh, like I said, I did 3 internships. I had my permanent job offer after my second internship there. So I knew I had that, but they were, oh, you don't need to go get an MBA or whatnot. And I said, I'm going to finish in 3.5 years. I think what's another year?
So why did you feel the need to have as many credentials as possible?
Well, because again, that was, again, parents had stressed that, my brother and sister had gone on and gotten additional credentials. My brother was an engineer with a power company in Hagerstown. My sister ended up being an educator down in the Virginia Beach area. So, I just said I need to follow in their footsteps because the more education you had, I felt the better opportunities you might get, or one might get. So I think the other thing that was surprising to me too, as I came up through my career, is that people were, for lack of a better description, impressed whenever I interviewed with them. Like, I remember when I was looking and thinking about leaving Citibank, and I went to do an interview down in the Wall Street area, and the guy looked at me, he says, "Wow, you went to Lehigh University?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "That's a good school. Like, how did you end up there?" Kinda. And then I started sharing with him. I said, "Well, I thought I wanted to be an engineer, and I was, a high school valedictorian." And he said, "High school valedictorian?" I said, "Yeah, of my high school and also of my junior high school." Wow, you should have had that on your resume. So, I mean, you got those, your reactions about, wow, you did all this? Wow, well, sort of like questioning. And this was even after I've been out in the workforce for a while. So when I was at the bank and I was heading up a due diligence group, I would go out with the senior bankers and to meet with the clients that we were looking to finance and whatnot. And then you could tell, and the senior banker would say, "Well, Ralph Thomas here is going to head our group, and it's very important, because that they do this due diligence." And you can see the folks say, like, "I thought he was the bad guy, the guy that carried the bags. He's the one that's going to be involved in the final decision for our bank loan." You just could see that on the face. And also, I remember in another situation I went through, and a client, he was a client of the bank. He was looking to do a deal on a beverage operation east of the Mississippi. And he started talking. He says, "I just need," and I just started talking to him about, here are the things that you need to be more concerned about, and yada yada yada. And you can hire one of the, that time, the big six to do it, and you can do this and do that. But here are the things that we do that are a little bit extra that what they were doing. He said, "Wow, I want you to do the work for me, and I want you to head the job." And I said, I'll run the job. I have a staff that'll do it, and But he said, yeah, I want, because she says, you know what you're talking about, and it was just interesting. So I think those were some of the things, and I laughed at it, as I came up and experienced that stuff. But as I look back, it was really, I said, wow, folks really were concerned that, can he do the job because he had the skill sets.
And I
And
assume
so,
you felt that was being questioned because you were black. Is that?
oh yeah, oh absolutely, yeah, because they hadn't, encountered someone, and that, oh, you're the head of the group, as opposed to you're going to be doing the work. Okay, and especially, as I said, when I go out with our senior bankers, and you could just see the change in people's reaction. Oh, well, Mr. Thomas, I'm glad to be working with you, yada yada yada, as opposed to, he's just one of the folks, that's going to be, ticking and tying or whatever.
So did you ever feel pressure to, at Lehigh, you talked about, I have to get an advanced degree, and the more the credentials, the better. I assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, did you ever feel you had to do more than anybody else because you were black?
Yeah, I did because, growing up, like I said, I was a valedictorian in my junior high school class, valedictorian in my high school. And then all of a sudden I go to Lehigh and there are a whole lot of smart kids there, majority white and whatnot, who were from some of the greatest schools, boarding schools and top-notch schools in the country. And I'm saying, wow. And, actually on campus, people say, oh, you're from Washington, D.C. And you went, oh, okay. And it was like, yeah. But I must say that my experience at Lehigh, for the most part, was great with interacting with faculty and staff. And had it not been for that relationship, I'm not sure I would have finished at Lehigh. I may have gone somewhere else. But I just put my head down and worked hard because and it was really tough in the first semester because I got my grades back and I was like, oh man, I've never gotten grades like that. I was at a 2.6. And I said, C's, and so I said I got to change this. So the second semester ended up getting on the dean's list and whatnot, and through my sophomore year and whatnot, and then ended up, like I said, graduating undergraduate in 3.5 years. I was just determined I wanted to get done with it and out of there, and then I said, and people said, "Oh, you're going to be going away from here." And I said, "Nah, I'm gonna sign up for another year." And they said, "For graduate school," because I felt, the need to, have an advanced degree.
So you go to work at Price Waterhouse with your MBA in hand. Uh, you mentioned that you said there were 3 out of about 100 in the office in Washington,
Yeah.
D.C.
Yeah.
3 people of color. Um, how, talk a little bit about your experience at Price Waterhouse. Did you feel extra pressure to perform better because you were one of 3 people of color? Did you feel
Yeah.
did you feel like you experienced discrimination when you were at because I know as we talked, you know, first you were able to get a job, which is we'll talk about those interviews. As you know, many of your predecessors in that first 100 couldn't even get hired. You got
Right.
hired, but still you got hired, but you were 3 out of 100 or so. Did you feel pressure to perform? Do you feel like you experienced discrimination when you were at the firm, and how did you deal with that?
Well, as I said, went on one of my internships where the senior manager came out and he said, "Oh, who is this guy?" And I was well, is there someplace, in the senior on the job when we were going home told me about this, and so and so wanted us to send you somewhere, and I'm like, what was all that about? And I said, think about it. And he just, he said, wow, that just doesn't make sense. But that was the guy, and I ended up doing, running a job where he was the manager on it. It was a beverage distribution operation, and the controller there was an African American who had worked with me at Price Waterhouse when I was at Price Waterhouse. So, the manager comes in, and says, what are you guys doing? We're in there talking. Oh, we can't take these gifts from there. So then the partner comes in, and, the guy who had previously been in Price Waterhouse says, oh, we want to give you a little thing. And all of a sudden it was okay. But when we said, oh, we can no, you can't do that. He was like a straight laced guy by the book and everything. So yeah, I mean, I've had some situations. I was on a job with a guy, and he was a senior, and he had dropped his car off at a local station to get service while we were working on this engagement. He was going back to get it, and he was upset because the guy had told, and it was a black guy and he used the N word about the guy, and he was, I'm sorry, but hey, and so you had those situations where people felt they could be comfortable and just say these things around you, and and then they would straighten up and say, oh wow, Ralph's in our presence, it's like, so it is, you did have those, and you had situations where you felt, again, even later in my career, where I was heading up due diligence jobs, and guys would say, "Boy, you really know what I need to have done." Again, and so you sit there and say, "Guess he didn't think I had the skill sets I knew what I was doing." And at the end of the day, the jobs I ran all turned out, in good shape. Never lost a credit. In terms of, my due diligence team had gained a lot of respect. When I was getting ready to leave Citibank, the senior credit manager said, "I'm not letting you go." I said, "Well, I'm going." So we got to talk about this. So that was kind of interesting, and in terms of that, but and I like I said, it's just you just never know what you're going to encounter, or at least back in those times.
Did you ever feel frustrated? Did you ever feel pressure? Did you ever say, why do people, did you ever get angry when you experience, you're like, I'm tired of experiencing this?
Well, yeah, I mean, you wondered why this happened with so and so, and that happened with this person, and then I remember a time that when I was in private industry, I was managing the largest system in the company, and we had a strike and everything, and you know you know I ended up getting the blame for stuff where people saw that there were issues, but they never brought it to my attention. We had a strike, and we then went in an emergency situation where all the folks that weren't union staff were operating the plants and everything. So I had to set up a separate payroll system. So I set up a separate payroll system, and worked with people, and it was a real hush, fast-paced job, and whatnot. And came back, and what happened was they didn't turn off the original payroll system, so people got paid twice. And who got hit with? Oh, it was Ralph, because he was around here, nobody else. And you know I ended up being, and that was the most important system in the organization. So I got put on the investor relations system, which was the worst one in an organization. But to my credit, when I did that, and when I indicated to the VP of investor relations I was leaving, he said, "Ralph, this is terrible. We lose good people like you, and I don't understand, because you stayed with this system. Everybody else wanted to dodge around it. You worked with it, yada, 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 yada. And I said, well, that's just my nature. I mean, I'm going to do the job and do it to the best of my ability. And he just said, I'm really saddened that we're, letting you get away and whatnot. So, but those are the things, I didn't shun responsibility and said, yep, it's my system. But other people saw that, something was wrong and they didn't say anything. They didn't question. And then, as when the thing blew up, it was like, okay, where's every, I was out there and all by myself. So I took the hit. And, when my boss came to me and said, we had you up for another promotion, but, that's going to, not happen as soon as it is. And um, I stayed with the company and for, I got that situation corrected and stayed. And a guy that had worked with me at Price Waterhouse came and he was the controller. He says, Ralph, I'm so glad that you didn't quit or leave, right after, the issue happened because you stayed in there, you took, your medicine and whatnot. And that's, true. So I think he was thinking that, well, I was just going to throw my hands up and leave and whatnot. But I stayed in there, corrected the situation, and got an offer. Brought me here to New Jersey initially with AT&T. So I think you go in this thing, you go through, and people still challenge like, does he know what he's talking about or whatever? And then you get them comfortable, and then they're like, oh boy, this is great. you know, so you still have those situations where people, and like I said, when I was in banking, I saw them where come in and then people would, look at me like, okay, he's a little man on the totem pole. And then all of a sudden the senior banker says, yeah, well, Ralph Thomas is going to sign off on the deal. So, you got to make sure your guys work with him and get everything that they need so that, the bank can be, comfortable with extending a loan to you. And you could see people start like, oh my goodness. Like, okay. So, but it's just part of life, unfortunately, that some people have that until they get an opportunity to get to know you and become comfortable. But it's a little more evident when you're a person of color, I think.
So I want to fast forward a little bit. You're at Citibank, I believe. I don't. Well, you end up finding out there's an opportunity at the New Jersey Society of CPAs. I don't know if you lived in New Jersey. I don't know how you became aware of this. I don't know if you were a member of the New Jersey.
Well, I was a member of the New Jersey Society of CPAs, and I was on their board there and whatnot. And my predecessor and her husband, who was a partner at one of the big six at that time, said, and he called me one night and he says, Ralph, my wife's going to retire, and I think you would be a great person because I had worked with him on some other things when I was at Citibank. We used some of the big six firm members when we didn't have the capability to do the proper due diligence. And he had actually talked to me and says, have you ever thought about taking your group and coming maybe would work with one of the firms? He says, because and we had those discussions as well. But at the end of the day, it was, he called me and told me about his wife who was going to retire. And he says, I think you would be a good job at it. And I put back to him and I said, really? And at first I said, oh, I'm not ready to retire because I thought that was a position to, but he says, just think about it. And so he gathered a couple of, former leaders and they started talking to me. And then I said, here's what I want you to do. And I think he was a little bit surprised at it. I said, I want you to go out to a number of the past presidents. And I want you to ask them, do they think they're ready to have a person of color to be the CEO and executive director of the New Jersey Society of CPAs? And you need to come back and tell me what they say, because I don't want to get in a situation where I'm not going to have support and not be able to do the job like I should be doing it because I don't have that support of that group. So he did that, and he came back and said, "Hey," and so far, I just what 22 years later, still here. So, but I always made sure that I didn't, try not to go into a situation where I didn't have support, because I think that's from talking to other colleagues, they found that wow, I didn't have the support that I thought I should have.
Have you experienced? And have you experienced as CEO of the New Jersey Society of CPAs? Do you feel you've experienced any pushback, racism, for if you want to be
No,
blunt, from members who didn't accept you from the membership versus the leadership?
well, not any blatant racism, but certainly when coming on board, I did a listening tour, and I went out and met with managing partners of firms and whatnot, and guys said, "Well, wow, you really understand our issues and concerns and everything." And I said, "Well, after all, I'm a CPA, and I worked in public accounting," and said, "Yeah, I do understand." But it was a surprise that, and I don't know why, but it was just, and I think it was just interesting to hear those comments. But my demeanor is that people are always going to judge you um, until they get to know you, and so that's why one of the first things I did was to go out and do the tour of talking to managing partners of firms, because I wanted them to get to know me and know that I had the skill sets and whatnot to do the job, so that they wouldn't be. And so it was interesting, in doing that people said, "Wow, yeah, you really know what our issues are." And I said, "Yeah, well, after all, man, I'm a CPA. I've worked in public accounting and I've been in CPA for a long." And they would just, and now, so that was interesting, but I think we've had a great relationship with folks here, um, during the 22 years that I've been here. You know, it's been interesting. You had your ups, you have your downs, but we've had more ups than downs. So that I see that as a victory and a good thing.
So you mentioned a couple things. Again, there's a theme here, which I'm hearing. They were surprised that I knew the issues. They were surprised this. You were at the bank and you wanted a job, and somebody was surprised that you were going to be leading the job. It seems like you've been living a life of surprising people in a positive way because you're good, you're smart, you know your stuff, you work hard, and you then use the word just now, demeanor. You had the right demeanor. You had the demeanor that that allowed you to persevere and deal with that. Do you feel? Do you do you ever tired of having to surprise people with just versus just being accepted?
No, I know that there are going to be folks out there that are still going to question. So, um, I just approach it, and I sit down with them, and I try to make sure that they have a comfort level with me. Um, I share my background and things of that. And like I said, people, like the one interview I did down in Wall Street, and the guy said, "Oh, wow, you were a valedictorian in junior high and high school. Boy, that like yeah, you should have that on your resume." You know, um, or you went to this. Boy, you should, so that, I guess he was surprised that I had these after we talked about all this and whatnot. And, so yeah, I don't know, yeah, I think, at the end of the day, you look at, doing the best job that you can, and then people make their decision, choices or decisions after that.
So you take over as CEO of the New Jersey Society of CPAs. You're now dealing with all these members. You're also dealing with all the other state societies and all the other executive directors, states, CEOs of the other state societies. You're dealing with the AICPA and NASBA, you name it. did you feel acceptance from that group? Did you have any? Did you have any? Did you experience any challenges from your peers?
Coming in and being in the marketplace that I'm in the Northeast corridor, I remember, with a couple of my colleagues from surrounding states said, well, if you need any help, just give me a call. Or one said, oh, well, welcome aboard, you should just give me South Jersey and because all those folks who work in the Philadelphia area and things like this, or they came in, as saying, well, if you need help, I'm here to help you. Like, it's almost like, well, I'm not sure you know what you're what you're doing, but ultimately, after a very short period of time, I guess they said, oh well, he does know what he's doing. And again, having the background that I've had in both public accounting and private industry, and whatnot, I've been through those hurdles, so to speak. So, and that's why I'm sort of very calm about things and whatnot. Um, and then I think the proof is in, and as my mom and dad, the proof is in the pudding. So if you have good pudding, then people say, oh, okay.
So how do you mentor? Because I'm sure uh, you mentor students and young people today. How do you mentor students who say, I shouldn't have to surprise anybody. They should accept me right away for who I am. Um, I, why do I have to prove myself more because I'm Black? How do you help a young person not get disenchanted or angry?
Well, I think I share with them my story. I said, look, hey, I had to come up through the ranks and prove to people, and you're always going to have that. Even folks that are in the majority segment will have that, but it's perhaps a little more pronounced with folks of color. And I said, but that's where you have an opportunity because you have an opportunity to turn the narrative of what people's initial thoughts are, and you do that by doing a good job. And I say that when to just the students where I go out in our high school program and talk to students and and they wow, he's in that position or he's doing. I said, yeah, it can be done. So, and that's why I participate in that because I think they need to see more folks like myself and more of our members of color that they've been able to be successful in the business world. Because I think, right, wrong, or indifferent, that's where some people get turned. Oh, I don't think that this is for me, or this would be for me. So I uh, I think we have a tremendous opportunity today in terms of getting folks of color out who have been successful, who've been able to navigate and so that they can share with folks that it's doable. Because I think sometimes people feel it's not doable. And I think the more face time that we have with students both at the high school level and the college level will hopefully um, turn that narrative around, if you will, because they will see individuals who have had a measure of success in their career and who have climbed the ladder and they're still on the ladder. They haven't fallen down and whatnot. So I think it's important that, we have, we take the time to mentor folks. And that's what I've done because I've had people that have mentored me. So still to this day, I have a person that has mentored me since for the last 35 years. And when I'm thinking about this situation, that situation, I will give that person a call. And or if I'm thinking about changing, jobs, I would give them a call. And it's interesting, one time I didn't do that, and they heard um, that I was thinking about possibility or of taking on the position as the deputy mayor of finance at the District of Columbia in Marion Barry's second term. And this person saw, I ended up meeting with a partner. They had just taken over the audit there, and I was telling them, I didn't like New Jersey. I wasn't, acting. He said, I got the perfect job for you. And this was the job. And so my mentor, he mentioned that to her, and she immediately called me, and I was still at Citibank at that time. She says, Ralph, what is wrong with you? I said, what are you talking about? I said, well, you said, what is this rumor I hear that you're thinking you're coming to take the position of the deputy mayor of finance? I said, well, no, somebody asked me or talked to me about it, but well, that's not what I heard. I heard that you were I said, well, and she said, you always call me and talk about these things. And I said, well, I didn't call you because I wasn't going to. That's not what I had. She said, and, in no uncertain terms, are you out of your mind? And I said, but you worked in that position. And she says, where am I now? You do not want that. If you want to come back to Washington, we'll find something else for you. But that was, and it's good to have people like that who are, and then, like I said, this is a person I consult every time I'm thinking about something. I consulted that person, when I was thinking about taking this job that I've been in, and it's all worked out. But I think it's great to have mentors, and I think that's one thing that we probably need to do a better job of is getting more mentors of color and also majority mentors too, because that's important, to do that. And I've heard a number of people who have been successful in their careers, and they say, you don't always have to have a mentor that looks like you. Um, and this was a person that was in the financial services industry, and she was concerned as she was up for promotion. And she said, I didn't know anybody around. So I think, a lot of times folks of color think that they have to have somebody that looks like them to be a mentor. And I tell them, yeah, don't always have to do that. Get folks that have, a power seat or whatever and ask them because they can help you along the way and whatnot.
So, Ralph, I want to dive a little bit now. Well, actually, one other thing. Then we're going to talk about the interviews that we've gone through. You were a former president of National Association of Black Accountants, NABA. So, what was it like to lead that organization and really sort of take a role building on the fact that you're a person of color? And tell us what stands out from that experience.
Well, NABA, I'm still very close with NABA, and I'm on their corporate advisory board, and have done a number of other things. My wife and I, have been both NABA members, and we do scholarships to NABA because it was an organization that really helped us, I think, to get to where we are today in our careers. So we have a real connection with NABA. So, in terms of coming to the society, I struggled with whether I should do that, and I had a lot of conversations with folks, notwithstanding the individual who had been a past president here at the society, who initially came that his wife was retiring and asked me about it. But I talked to Barry, I talked to a number of other folks in AICPA because at that time there had never been a person of color to head up a state society. So I was like, well, what am I going to be in for? If by doing something like this. So and I was hesitant because I thought I had wanted to had some aspirations of maybe being a CFO at a major company or a publicly traded company or some large organization and whatnot. And so it was really my conversations with Barry that really kind of set the tone. And he was very straight. He said, you're not going to get stock options like you got, we're getting at Citibank and, huge bonuses and things of that nature. He said, but, we're trying to enhance or increase diversity in the profession. And you being in a position like this, you have an opportunity to be a part of that change. So that was kind of what convinced me, because if you go back to our earlier conversation about that professor at Lehigh who talked, because he said at some point you will run your own organization or company. And so I thought about that, and I said, "Oh yeah." He says, "But Barry said, I'm frank with you. Again, you're not going to get, huge bonuses or maybe not bonus at all or stock options or anything like that. So, but you'll be in a very visible position that where you can make a difference, especially as we're looking at doing, more on the diversity and inclusion side of things." So that was one of the things that convinced me to kind of come down this route, because I think I shared with you earlier. Originally, I said, "Oh, I'm not ready to retire." Like that's what's a retirement job. Uh, but so again, 22 years later, I'm still here, and hopefully, I've made a difference. And I've the one thing that I've been looking to do is mentor, other folks and who might be potential CEO material for a state society. And so, because I think that's important, you know, I, I get introduced a lot with saying the only one, and I hate that thing, the only one, the first one, and so that's been one of my things over the last couple of years. And as I, approach, retirement, that I really want to work towards, and hopefully helping somebody um, to be in the same seat that I'm in before, I retire.
Do you feel pressure because you're Black? Do you feel more pressure to advance? Like you just said, you don't like being referred to as the only one. It's important that we have more than one Black state CPA Society CEO. Do you feel pressure to move that needle forward?
I don't think pressure is. I feel a responsibility that if I see anybody that I think that can fit that bill, shame on me if I don't go out and reach out to them, and have been doing that, and we haven't got a hit yet, but it's been close. So but I think it's important. I think individuals should do that no matter what, whether you're black, white, purple, or pink. That you should, help people along the way, particularly when you have, people who have the talent, who have the skill sets, because sometimes they really don't think that they are ready. And why that's the case, but just like when I got approached, I said, I'm not sure that that's right. And the person who was pushing me along said, I know you can do the job. I've seen you. We were thinking about bringing you and your team on with our team here before, and so on and so forth. So I just think that that's a role that folks like myself should be playing and doing, and assisting people to prepare themselves for an opportunity like this. And shame on us if we don't do that.
I agree. Progress needs we have not gotten where we need to get, without a doubt. So you interviewed, I believe, 5 or 6 people who were in the first 100 Black CPAs. A variety of people from a variety of backgrounds, a lot of experience. So talk about, if you as you reflect on that, what are your feelings towards your credential? What really what stood out from you? What were the common themes? What really just sort of share your experience and having this unique experience of interviewing these. Reflect a little bit on what it's been like talking to these individuals and what you've learned and sort of your gut reaction to the whole thing.
Well, again, I have to thank you for letting me have this opportunity, because it was awesome. It was really awesome to you hear stories about, well, this person went through that, but to actually talk to people who went down those pathways and encountered those barriers and all the things that they had to go through. And, I reflect back on my experience, and I said, boy, I don't have anything to complain about given some of the stuff that these individuals had to go through to become, get licensed, become a CPA, and whatnot. So it was really rewarding from my standpoint, and put a lot of things in perspective for me. That when I have my days where I'm down, I said, you know what, you don't have anything to be down about. The folks that you just interviewed went through a whole heck of a lot more. Just as the old folks would say, put on your big boy pants and just get going. So it was really enlightening though to hear their trials and tribulations, the things that they had to do, and for them to be able to share those things with you. In particular, Dr. Harris was very interesting, and Dr. Clark too. Johnny Clark was real. Particularly she talked about their experience in taking the CPA exam, where they got there early, got in the front seats in Georgia, and then the proctor came and said, why are you all sitting here, and whatnot? And he wanted to move them, and she said, well, I wanted to get here and get a good seat, and we wanted to, we got. So it was sort of bordering on, I want to separate you guys, because there were the folks of color that had all come early because they wanted to get a good seat. They didn't want to be in the back and whatnot, and so she refused to move. And she said, and we talked about, I said, well, once you pass the CPA exam, how long did it take you to get your license? She said, it was like almost 2 years. So finally, I decided to go down to the board to see what was happening. And I think that proctor may have penalized her or had some, but stuff like that you say, why? Really? Those things go on like that? That she had to wait 2 years to get her certificate. So, interviewing these folks was very humbling and, make me step back and say, I don't have a lot to be upset about given the things that these folks did. One, Dr. Harris, had to, take the exam in Virginia Beach, and she was up in the northern part of Northern Virginia. Well, the state board sent out messages to let people know what hotels they could go in. She couldn't go into those hotels. She called the state board to see if they could provide assistance. So she ended up commuting. So it's this, that determination and perseverance to, pass the exam and to, not be deterred by the barriers and obstacles and things that were put in front of them, was just really enlightening. And then the challenges once they did pass the exam, to get experience. Where could they go? What firm, particularly majority firms weren't hiring folks of color back when most of these folks, had passed the exam. So here they passed the exam and now don't have an opportunity to get the experience requirement. And you say, but they were just determined. So, it's a good message, good for me to have had that experience, because now I could really share something with, young people. Say, look, you don't have anything to complain about. If you want to complain, let me tell you the story about this person and that person that may deter them from wanting to become a CPA. But it was really, I tell you, I really thank you for providing me the opportunity, because I really learned a lot. I knew a lot of these folks, but to really peel back the onion with them and have them share, the challenges that they had to go through, how they felt as they were pursuing becoming a CPA, and their inability to get hired by majority firms. So just an awesome experience having talked to them, and particularly the females. They were the feisty ones, like Dr. Johnny Clark. she when was mentioning about the sitting in the CPA exam, and I said, well, what would you have done if that gentleman had moved you? She said, I would have punched him in the face. you know, and so that was just interesting. And I said, and also about, not, taking so long to get her certificate, and the thing, and look at her now, the things that she has been able to, has accomplished with being on so many boards and this and that. And it would just been a shame for her not to become a CPA because of some of the obstacles or barriers that were put in front of her. And, um, the others that are there, they all had stories of about, um, their experiences and the challenges that they had. Taking the exam and meeting the experience requirement, and whatnot. So, it was very interesting. I put myself in their seat. Would I have gone through all of that? I don't know. I really don't know. So I'm glad that they, helped pave the pathway for folks like myself.
This has been a long time since these individuals blazed that path, and you're still hearing people going, kind of being surprised that wow, Ralph's in charge. He's not just a worker. So have we made the progress that we need to make, Ralph?
We've had progress. Is it where we should be? No, absolutely not. There's still, folks that are going to, question and, take a wink. Is this I think, I think they'll, quite honestly, we'll always have some of that time when both you and I sitting in our rocking chairs and rocking back and forth and retrenching, our experiences. I think you'll still have that situation. Um, I don't think it'll ever go away. It may lessen and whatnot, but I don't think it will ever go away. There will always be folks that'll have that doubt, or you know, I gotta, they gotta show me something to make me. So I've accepted that over the years, that's what I, when I change positions or taking on a new assignment, that I do that. Yeah, I'm sure there people were questioning, um, what Ralph could do coming into this position and how it, and so that's why I went out, and got and did what I call my listening tour to give them an opportunity to see who I was. And then, once I, gave them the floor, once they had the floor to talk about the things that were of concern to them, it wasn't all about me. And I said, well, here's some thoughts of how we might be able to help. And it was like, wow, again, you really know what we're going through. And I said, yeah, well, I do. I've been down the pathway that way as well. And so I think, but it was more important for me to build a relationship with with the managing partners of firms so that they could have confidence in me that I knew what I was doing. And that's why, like I said, I went out on this thing, and I must have met with, 20, 30 folks just to get them to be comfortable with me. Because, like, who is this guy, Ralph Thomas? Well, where did he come? And I think, I think we've done a good job, along with my staff, and solidifying that, and making sure that our members feel comfortable to be able to come to us, that we're a go-to person, um, to help them in that regard.
Well, after I took over CEO of the Illinois CPA Society, I felt the same. I felt I had to go out and prove and to myself, to these managing partners. So I can't even fathom my being white, at least talking to white predominantly, in fact, exclusively. I've not yet talked to, except for Lester McKeever, a black managing partner, and Kim Yellen. But So I felt I had to prove that I was worthy. I can't even imagine how you felt having to prove you were worthy of the position, but also on top of that being black. That is a whole nother layer of having to prove that is hard for me to fathom what that was like. So congrats and kudos to you because you did it. You did it.
Yeah. Well, it certainly helped that, I was a CPA and that I had been on the society's board of trustees and had gotten actively involved in their initiative on the diversity and inclusion. So there were people who knew me. And, and so I think, as I said, when the opportunity was presented to me, I challenged the individual who asked me to consider taking on the job to go out and get a pulse read from past presidents about this. Were they going to be comfortable? Were they ready to have somebody of color? And, for the most part, they were, but we have a past president, God bless his soul, and he would meet with every executive director, but he specifically came to, we had breakfast. He used to come up for our scholarship program because he had a scholarship in his name. And he said, well, Ralph, if you ever have any problems down in South Jersey, because when I was president, I was trying to get the folks in South Jersey to go out and engage more folks of color. And he says, just call me up. I'll go with you and help you out. And I said, no, I think I'm okay. I'm all right. He says, well, don't hesitate because I tried, for the longest time to get more folks of color into the society, and I just went up against like a brick wall. But I think people have to, in any situation, people have to get to know you, so that they can feel comfortable and comfort level. And I think that, that's one of the things that I try to work at very hard so that people know me. I'm an open book. And because I think once they get to know you and, it's a positive thing, that's where the confidence grows and your ability, having you run the organization and whatnot.
We're at this sort of crossroads. We're continuing forward. Do you think the accounting what do you think the opportunity looks like, the future looks like for black people in the accounting and the CPA profession, and if you were to go out and talk to black accounting students, which I'm sure you do today, um, um, what advice do you share with them as to how to move ahead? So what advice would you share with students today, black students today, young students? And do you think what do you think the opportunity? What is the future? What do you think the opportunity looks like?
I think there's a great opportunity. The question is whether folks of color are going to seize that opportunity, because I try to throw data at students, when I talk about, the growth in small businesses and how that growth in small businesses is being projected to be predominantly in the minority communities, with women and Latinos and whatnot. And so I said, think about that. There's an opportunity because these folks, if they're going to be the movers and shakers going down the road, they're going to need people to work with them. And what better opportunity than to have, a minority owned firm business out there and then have a minority firm servicing that business. First of all, there hopefully is, a culture sharing thing there, because if I'm a minority firm, I would have an appreciation for what that minority business may be going through. And so I think that's the opportunity. I think that the challenge is getting out before students of color, and letting them know the opportunity that exists, that they could come out and be a CPA, work for a firm, maybe have their own firm, and could be able to control their destiny. I don't think we get enough of that messaging out to them. And and we suffer because unlike the legal profession and the medical profession, they have TV shows and everything. People accounting. Oh, so I think we have to dress the CPA credential up more to give it more visibility, really share with folks the opportunities that exist, not only in public accounting, but in private industry as well. And also that, public accounting is not your, grandfather Chevrolet anymore. It is taking on a whole different perspective with the advent of advisory services. So it's just not about, doing audits and tax returns and that kind of work. It's advising clients and being their, go-to person when you as a business are thinking about making a move. Now who do you go to? You go to the accountants, the CPAs, and ask their opinion because hopefully they have a perspective of where the marketplace is going. So I think it's a thing of messaging. I think it's about also, getting more folks that look like folks of color to share their story and what their experiences are. We have a high school program. I'm sure you have a high school. I know you have a high school program and your Mary Washington program as well. But the more students of color can get exposed to people that look like them, they say that could be me. So when we go to our schools that have significant populations of students of color here in New Jersey, we try to make sure that we have somebody that looks like them. So they could say, that could be me. And, I have one school that I do, and I do it every year. And I go down there and I think the kids get excited. They say, you run the society? I said, yeah, I run the society. I said, it's doable. I didn't start out in my career like that, but these are the opportunities that you could get to. It is doable. And I think that is so important that, folks sharing those stories about, how they have moved and navigated through their career so that people can say, okay, I think I think I'm up for that. I think I can, I'll try that at least.
So it's been 100 years since the first Black CPA. What's your vision for the next 100 years?
Well, my vision is that I hope we do a better job of sharing with students of color and ethnicity the opportunities that exist. Because if we don't do that, then, I think we'll be in the same boat that we've been in since AICPA launched the initiative in, was it 1968? I think is when they first started. There's some progress, but not enough progress. So I think we really have to, as my dad would say, put some different lipstick on the horse or the cow or whatever, so that people will look at it differently and really share the change that's taking place in the accounting profession and the CPA profession with the expansion into advisory services, because I think that provides a lot more bandwidth and hopefully more exposure too, because of the discussion on that versus audit and tax and compliance work. When you look at firms today, certainly the big four and the next tier, the major firm group, those advisory service practices are growing like wildfire. They're growing by virtue of mergers, but mergers with not necessarily financial organizations, other organizations. Sitting on the diversity and inclusion, we used to get those statistics about, firm growth, mergers that it would take. And you saw a shift of firms, particularly the major firm group, where they were not acquiring, just financial or accounting firms. They were acquiring other business, HR, those things, so that they're seeing that, like I said, the story today is a lot different than what it was 30, 40 years ago. in terms of what the opportunities that exist in being a CPA and working in a CPA firm. It's just not, the debits and credits and doing the tax returns and the compliance work. There are tremendous opportunities where, CPAs have the opportunity to become trusted advisors for their clients and play a bigger role. So I think that that's something that we gotta to get out and beat that drum about that opportunity.
Okay. Well, I will tell you, I'm not surprised. You didn't surprise me with how wonderful you did in interviewing these individuals. I've known you for a good number of years now, and you've never surprised me because I always knew you were the quality guy you are, and I always had the utmost respect from you from the first time I met you. I'm honored to call you a peer, and I'm lucky to have you as peer. So it has truly been. You've inspired me in many many ways. You've inspired me, but you haven't surprised me because I always expected that you were who you were. So you are. And one thing about Ralph Thomas is you are who you are. So I want to thank you for sharing your time with us. I truly hope the accomplishments and experiences that you've talked about and you've actually now drawn out of people and now shared your own experiences motivate generations of Black CPAs to help lead our profession. So I thank you on behalf of the Illinois CPA Society, on behalf of the Black CPA Centennial Project for your participation in it. It's been my honor to work with you. So I'll give you one last thing, last shot, and then we can call it a wrap.
Well, Todd, again, I know it sounds like a broken record, but I thank you for the opportunity to do this. And the feeling is mutual. We've been colleagues and friends. We don't always agree on things, but we have fun at what we do. And it's been great to have a relationship with you. That the relationship that we do have, we can be frank with each other and everything. But I applaud you and the Illinois Society for taking on this project, and because I think the importance is these trailblazers, they sacrificed a lot, to open up doors for those of us of color who have come behind them and who didn't have to experience the things, the enormity of barriers and roadblocks that they had to experience. Yeah, we had our challenges, once we get in firms and people may, question our, the capabilities, but, to be denied or have the challenges in taking this CPA exam like Ruth Harris did, because, no hotels in the Virginia Beach area would allow her to stay there. So how was she going to take the exam, commuting, having to commute from where she lived? So, it's just things like that. Or, Burt Mitchell with having to find a place to get experience. And the same thing with, Lester and McKeever. Fortunately, he had Mary Washington. She was in business and she was able to provide that. So, you look at, things. Life hasn't been easy for the folks. But, I think the pathway is less bumpy or troublesome today. There's still going to be challenges and whatnot, but hey, that's life. And I think hopefully, like I said, I want to see some growth in those individuals that are becoming CPAs, individuals of color. I think it's so important. And I think, again, I go back to data. The growth in small businesses is going to be dominated by minority-owned, female-owned businesses, Hispanic-owned businesses. So there's a wealth of opportunity there for, folks of color to be engaged in part of that. And I just think we gotta get the story out. We gotta get the story out and tell folks. It's important, and I think, state society is getting out and, getting to folks at the high school and even, junior high or middle school level is important because those seeds need to be planted early about these opportunities. And and they don't see those on television like they see the medical shows and the lawyer, the shows about attorneys and whatnot, or the competition. Everybody wants to be an athlete or whatnot, but we gotta do a better job to say there's a great opportunity in being a CPA, and you may not be dunking the basketball or scoring the touchdown, but you're going to be, working with the individuals who do that, and with the teams that do that, and helping them, navigate their success and their respective fields. So
it can be a great career.
it is a great career. We just have to get more people to understand and have it be exposed to it. And so I think that's why, I think internships are important. A lot of firms have moved away from it, and they're now maybe starting to move back. But, I think, getting in and seeing what we really do, hopefully will be something that elevates people's interest in saying, oh, I think that's something I would like to do. So we just got to continue to work harder.
That's it. We'll just keep working at it. All right. Well, thank you very much, Ralph. And again, I appreciate everything you've done.
And the feeling is mutual, Todd. Thank you again. I can't tell you how after doing these interviews, it's just been. This will be something that I'll remember for forever and ever. And now I have a much better appreciation for why I'm able to do what I'm doing today as a result of doing those interviews.